Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and I am very pleased after some time to have my friend Robbie Martin on. It's been a while, especially with everything that's been going on in the world, and then, throughout this whole COVID 1984 thing, to have riots break out for something other than being locked down for the past 2.5 months and businesses being ruined seemed out of left field. Before we go to Robbie, I want to remind everybody we are fully demonetized on this platform. So $5, $10, $15, it does mean the world to me. The GoFundMe is in the link below. You can check out Robbie Martin stuff over at MediaRoots.org, where he's doing a lot with his sister Abby, and of course his A Very Heavy Agenda YouTube channel where he plays retro video games while talking politics via Maine Politics. Robbie, it's been a while, brother. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, Jason. Little stressed out, but otherwise okay. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into it. Obviously the lockdowns were wearing thin with a lot of people. A lot of people have lost their life savings, have been pushing back, have said they wanted to reopen. We've seen where the quote-unquote hotspots are, and they aren't. And in some places, the country was beginning to reopen. Then we get this video, which is horrific. It's terrifying. But it's not something new to people like yourself and myself that have been following this forever. Police brutality is a very real issue. Injustice is a very real issue. Racism is a very, very real issue. Now we have not only legitimate protests, but riots, not in a centralized area, but throughout the country. And I know you're over on the West Coast where some of the worst of it is happening. I'd say Los Angeles and New York, especially with the looting, that is probably some of the worst looting we're seeing throughout the country. What is your take on all this madness? And let's hit all the angles.
I don't even know where to begin, Jason. I mean, I think one of the interesting things to all this is that at the end of all this, they've basically brought the National Guard out, and now they're actually talking about bringing active military troops onto the streets. You and I both thought that was going to become possibly a permanent state of things as a response to COVID-19, because of all these quarantine zones and things like that. I never expected that this would result from something like this. I mean, it's so bizarre that the same thing we were fearing has happened, but for almost completely different reasons, piggybacking on another crisis. So that's a strange thing. Mm-hmm. Psychologically, very, very stressful to have. We're already under so much psychological stress with this pandemic. And then to have this happen on top of it, I mean, how does a human being even deal with that? So that's something that really needs to be grappled with. It's a very stressful situation. People are already really afraid of the pandemic. So I don't know. I mean, I guess where I'm going now with it, Jason, is that this could be it. Like, what I'm most concerned about right now is the videos I'm seeing of police acting more brutal against regular protesters than I have ever seen. And not just protesters, bystanders. Mm-hmm. I think that's especially alarming to me, where I just saw a video yesterday from St. Louis where there's a whole line of police rubber bullet shooting down at cars under the bridge that are just like in a traffic jam, like all the cars indiscriminately. And I'm just thinking, I've never seen video of police acting this way before towards bystanders. So that's obviously really alarming. And I don't know how to explain it. If it's just this video, so on one level, I can understand why people think there's something else happening here. What is actually going on here? I can understand that on a gut level. I just don't know what it is. I don't think Bill Gates and George Soros are planting the bricks. Mm-hmm. Where my mind goes is that, how do we know the cops and the army aren't planting the bricks? Like, are they being planted? Who is actually planting those bricks?
Well, all right, so let's talk about all these different things. Number one, like you said, you and I really were worried that these quarantine zones were going to become more and more militarized. Now, that seemed to peel back. But at the same time, a lot of military was already activated and ready. The National Guard was ready to go. They're already heavily embedded in cities like Los Angeles and New York still. You know what I mean? Then this happens, and as I said before, it's just hard for me to believe that all of these protests start taking place across the country when we can't get 100 people to protest for Julian Assange without some kind of push. Now, what that push is, I don't know. But then you have the inability of certain cities in major states to protect from looting, right? But at the same time, egregious video comes out of them being violent against actual protesters and not looters, which is insane to me, right?
Yeah, standing down against looters and using their resources to just beat up protesters.
And I understand why people would say, well, they're doing this on purpose to force Trump's hand to bring in the military and martial law because they won't bring in the National Guard. And you would think that the National Guard would be used just to protect storefronts on Main Street, just to sit there in front of them and allow that, if anything else. And then to help people that are actually being physically assaulted, because we are seeing that as well. Not to arrest people, not to sit there and detain people, but possibly be put there. We're not seeing that. And then on top of it, there are plenty of actual peaceful protests going on that the media is not showing as much. And you're only seeing in Twitter feeds. We saw some in Oregon. We saw some in Poughkeepsie, New York yesterday. We saw some in New Jersey. And the media refuses to focus on that. And that also is alarming to me. And then you take all of this COVID stuff, and just 2 weeks ago, Robbie, they were taking down live streams of Dan Dix showing people protesting the lockdowns in Toronto, because you can't show protests of lockdowns. But there's no such thing going on with protests here. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
No,
it's fascinating.
And
level of hypocrisy for sure.
And it's right in your face, right? So you were taking down doctors and lockdown protesters, but now you'll show the most violent videos again and again on social media, which include the murder of a 77-year-old ex-St. Louis police officer, for some television. It's all over the media. So obviously, on one end, you have a decision being made at the upper echelons that this is okay and we can put this stuff out, but the suppression of people against the lockdown is not okay. Meanwhile, right in front of our very eyes, social distancing, that whole moniker, is now a myth. As you are seeing hundreds, if not thousands of people arm to arm, whether they're wearing a mask or not. So what do you make of just the psychological aspects, not on our mental health alone, but of this gradual event where we're supposed to believe two things at once simultaneously? Protests okay, just not protesting the lockdown. Social distancing in society, just not when you're protesting racial injustice.
It's really strange. I don't know what to make of it. I'm baffled by it. And I think that the only thing that could really explain why some of the mainstream media networks are doing that is because they'll use anything they can to make Trump look bad. Now, that's not to say that there's not anything legitimate about the protests. I think there is. But I do think that explains sort of why the media stance would change so quickly from social distancing lockdowns to that. But there might be something more to it. I don't know. The other thing you said I wanted to address earlier where, I think we get stuck sometimes in this framework that because there was obviously some kind of factionalized deep state, kind of attempt to either undermine Trump's presidency or frame him through Russiagate. I do think we tend to get into this framework too often where if something seems to be afoot, like there does seem to be something to be weird here. The BRICS, I keep going back to the BRICS, that it somehow it must not be, coming from within Trump's own government or the Pentagon or domestic forces. So I wanted to go back to that because I think I see, because even the White House now, I don't know if you saw this, Jason, they actually published a video of those BRICS. They published a little collage on Twitter just now saying, who's doing this? Is it Antifa? They're trying to blame Antifa. The more conspiratorial narrative I keep seeing is that it's some kind of globalist thing. Alex Jones is saying it's the globalists plus China plus Soros. But if it is being planted, who is doing it? I mean, we can't. I can't stress this enough. We have to look at everybody. Like we cannot only look at it in a narrow framework. Like it could really be anybody.
Mm-hmm.
What was that?
I don't
Is that
know.
me or you?
That's me. I don't know. Some 800 number trying to call my Google Hangouts. How dare you?
Google Hangouts.
Yep. Awesome.
But no, it's so weird, Jason. So I could totally understand that. I mean, the hypocrisy of the mainstream media. And also, I want to call out, not anybody specifically, but I'm really disappointed in a lot of libertarians right now that were more outraged at the COVID-19 lockdowns than they are at actual, potential active military being deployed on the streets. So I feel that we need to remember that this is still, no matter how you feel about looting or what's happening, in the streets and places being burnt down, like the police response to this is really, really scary. And I'm worried that more people aren't talking about that. I think that's something that I guess what I'm saying, Jason, is I wish more people on the left and the right side of the spectrum could band together against that specifically. And I don't see that happening.
Well, let's talk about the specifics of the looting and the police response, because I think that is really important. Number one, whatever powers that be have already kind of gutted Main Street America. And to the point where a lot of people don't understand how devastating it's going to be. For instance, the University of California announcing that they were not going to return to school in the fall, and it affects 25 other schools. All those small little college towns are already, without money for 3 months. They still can't open up bars, right? So all those bar businesses are going down. What happens when the kids don't go back? The pizza places, the bars, the Chinese food, the people that are employed living there that work at the school, not only just the teachers, the custodial engineers, you name it. All of a sudden they don't have jobs. And the only ones that maintain their jobs are the bare bones and the teachers that are now teleconferencing. Well, that's going to happen in my community, the SUNY schools, right? So you already have Main Street eviscerated. They're not ready for that economic impact. We haven't even talked about the $6+ trillion printed out of nowhere. Now the mom and pop shops that may have survived this in places like Albany or Binghamton, which again heavily rely on those colleges and schools and influx of students, well, they might not, because their windows were smashed and their inventory was taken. And who's going to bail out all these riots? You know who will survive? Macy's, Target. And I'm not encouraging people to go do that. I'm saying they'll have the insurance. And once again, we see an even further consolidation of power and the little guy really being fucked over, Robbie. I mean, that's the bottom line. Out of all this, it's white, black, Asian, purple, zebra-colored businesses that are all going to be affected by this if you decide to smash in their windows and take their product. Period. Doesn't matter what you think about this politically. And again, that feeds into, to me, this predator class agenda where the middle class is just done and automation nation is on the way, brother. And I hate to say it like that, but after something like this, how many more people are going to be clamoring for some kind of a UBI or even more of a bailout to fix their business? I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll just have to see how wide that destruction gets. Because for now, I don't know. I mean, they're already lifting the curfew in San Francisco tomorrow, apparently. So maybe it was a short sort of burst, of this sort of chaos. But if it continues, I mean, yeah, it is sort of, it's just a shock to any small business owner or system, obviously, if they're already having to pay rent, on a business that they can't use. And then if they get their windows broken, I mean, it's a extreme financial hardship. So, yeah, that's a serious thing to be to think about. I don't know, I don't know though. I think that stuff, I see that more as temporary, where I see the military and the police response as more of a permanent escalation. Where, one of the pivotal moments with riot police, SWAT police, escalations, it sort of permanently stayed that way. Wasn't even after 9/11. It was the battle in Seattle. I think it was 99.
Yep. WTO protests.
Yeah, where we had seen the police and the military sort of militarized police in a way that we hadn't ever seen before. We'd also seen protesters sort of black bloc tactics in a way that hasn't been used before. There was an escalation in tactics. I mean, obviously, I blame the police. And I think that what we're seeing now is a similar thing where we're not going to go back from that. And that's really frightening to me. We're like, to watch police like chasing down bystanders who are like trying to walk away from protesters and tackling them. Like, I mean, I know that sounds maybe not that big of a deal, but I don't know if people have been seeing some of these videos, but they're really frightening. They keep coming. And I don't know how that's happening. Like, I don't think
or macing people in their homes who are in the second floor windows. On their
balconies. Yeah, that shit's new. So I'm pretty worried about that, and I don't know. I mean, so maybe that just makes me too much of a lefty that I'm like more worried about that than rioting. But
no, listen, I think the military response is very tough, but I also think you have to look at it like, yeah, they are trying to force Trump's hand, and believe me, his militarization, I'm not defending his actions.
Are they trying?
Well, I would say if you look at it like right now, Governor Cuomo refuses to use the National Guard, even though they're in the city, to just block off businesses. And even last night there was looting. Now, on the flip side to that, the protest where people went down the Manhattan Bridge was pretty peaceful. You know, they went past that cop car. I actually streamed it live as it was happening. I believe at the end of the day, they almost did 300 arrests, but that protest was going on at like 10:30, 11 p.m. Eastern. Peaceful, no one gets hurt, but then there's still looting going on. So if you've already got the military there, and by the way, Robbie, I mean, you've been to New York, they've got the military there when all this isn't going on. They're already in Penn Station. You know, the National Guard is already down there post 9/11. So to me, again, that's what you do. They're not there to arrest anybody. They're not there to enforce anything. They're not even there to support the police. The police have to deal with their own bullshit. But, they're there to line up on the small businesses and stop looting. But Cuomo won't do that. And he's the one that's already bragged, I watched this thing today, that he has the sole power to enforce the National Guard. And if he wanted to do so, he would have to displace de Blasio, which he would not have to do. You know, de Blasio will roll with whatever Cuomo says. Now, I don't like the military going there, especially when you see what the police have already done, right? I don't like the Army going in. Like, that's the next thing. Oh, we're going to declare the Army and National Guard. You've already got a population, again, for the vast majority of them, have had limited contact with their daily routines for the past 2.5 months. And the frustration is there. You know what I'm saying? But I think to get the people out in masses, to have the coordinated bricks, to get the police provocateurs out there. We've seen video of that, right? The police smashing windows so that they can enforce things, etc. I think there's something bigger at play here. Again, we don't even know what Chauvin and this guy's relationship was prior to this, right? Was it a racially motivated attack? I don't know. Was it just police brutality? I don't know. Was there something else to this? I mean, there's the one city councilwoman that says they worked together for 17 years at a restaurant together. Later on, the restaurant owner tried to clarify that and said that they worked in the same place for a year, but in different spots of the restaurant. I mean, even if they had casual contact before this, there's a possibility of something else going on, Robbie. And for everybody to jump into, again, this racial bandwagon where it's Black Lives Matter. If Black Lives mattered so much, they'd be focusing on that black cop that just got shot to death, a grandfather. They'd be focusing on the black businesses that have been torn asunder now. But that's not what this is. You know, this to me is order out of chaos, another power grab. And eventually, I think it's the movement, after some egregious things happen with the military and the police and citizens, to an automated nation robot police force. You know, we've already seen DARPA, Spot, the DARPA robot over in Thailand at parks telling people to socially distance. And it'll be sold as, well, we won't have these problems anymore because these robots will be programmed not to use lethal force. We won't have to shoot the beanbag guns at people. You know, they'll be able to easily detain them and nobody will get hurt. You know, and this way we'll save police lives. I really think the next push on this, other than the Track Trace Database Society, all that stuff, is automation in all sorts of levels. Again, My state supposedly reimagining education with Bill and Melinda Gates and reimagining New York City with Eric Schmidt, the man behind the bestseller, The New Digital Age, Reshaping the Future of People, Nations, and Businesses. And oh yeah, Michael Bloomberg, the other billionaire that just happens to be involved in population control. I mean, what do you think? What do you think of the idea of, after all this is said and done, so many people don't have their jobs, don't have a means of income, are begging for a UBI, and the automation nation really begins?
Yeah, I mean, you said a lot there. The automation nation thing, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's definitely certain types of labor, though, that'll never be able to be automated. So I do think while that is an issue, I mean, I think like actual, borderline slave labor and like exploitation of human beings will always sort of be there in the equation. But, I mean, I think there's plenty of people in the Black community also, raising those issues that you're talking about. It's just that there's a reductive mainstream media narrative that we see, from like mainstream media like CNN, MSNBC, that's just trying to use whatever ammunition they can against Trump. And they pretend that they actually care about Black lives. These people on CNN, they don't really care. So that's, I guess that's how I would see that. And I guess I just don't see this as anything forcing Trump's hand. It's like, he didn't, I blame a lot of his administration and his own rhetoric for escalating a lot of this. And on some level, there must have been top-down orders for the cops to act more brutal towards peaceful protesters. I think that's key here. Yes, the looting is crazy. It's chaotic. I can understand why a lot of people on the right are fixated on that. The problem that I see, though, is that what's happening with all these police and riot police who are acting crazier than they ever have before. I mean, are they just acting like that because they finally had enough of Antifa and Black Lives Matter? I don't think so. I think they're literally being ordered to act more authoritarian and more violent towards regular people and not looters than they ever have been before. And that's all Trump's doing. Nobody forced his hand. I would argue that doesn't even seem to be coming on the state level. Yes, these people are activated by the state. Mayors, governors are responsible. But the coordinated aggression, the escalated aggression, is just something that seems really pronounced to me. So I just think it's important not to absolve Trump or feel that anybody's forcing his hand to do this. Otherwise, it's sort of like, well, they forced him to become a dictator, or they forced him to, it's like, so I don't know. I just want to try to avoid that line of thinking.
Well, to me, it seems like whether or not, a second wave happens, I think that there's a good chance that the fear of a second wave is going to come in September, October, just before these elections, and they're going to have plans in place for some kind of a mail-in ballot, massive mail-ins, not only across, the quote-unquote blue states, but perhaps across the country, especially if they try to lock the country down again. Do you think that's how they plan on getting rid of Trump and putting in whoever, Biden names as his running mate? And there's a lot of buzz now around Elizabeth Warren, who just happened to make some of the protests the other day, Robbie.
Wait, what are you saying? That you think that they'll use a second wave of COVID to delay the election or something?
Not delay it, but just to push for that mail-in ballot, the absentee ballot that just gets mailed to people that they don't actually have to register for. And just you know what I mean? Because that's the next fear. Even again, it's okay to protest this, but it won't be okay to vote. Like, just the idea that they were trying to say it wouldn't be okay to go to a ballot, right, and vote. And now nobody's questioning. Again, arm-to-arm people. Everybody's talking about social distancing. That shit should be over as of today. As of the other day, as of the day before the other day, as of even before these things have happened, as we've seen, even by Cuomo's own admission, that the larger numbers are coming from people that have, quote-unquote, been isolated anyway. Again, how could you really restrain this thing when so many people were going out into the world and being active and then going back to their homes where people are supposedly isolated anyway? So my point is that if they use fear again to close down society, right, or maybe they release something even worse. We have to put that into the equation too. If they'll release one bioweapon, in my opinion, Robbie, they'll release another. And now you've got people even more scared, and they're in their homes again. And now it's all mail-in ballots. You think that's a possibility to try to rig this 2020 election? Because I don't see them trying to put Joe Biden on a stage next to Donald Trump in person anytime soon.
No, I mean, I think, yeah, there's always a danger. This is why Trump is so savvy. He points to things that are on a gut level, that they can be used to commit fraud. So like, the liberal argument is, well, nobody commits voter fraud through mail-in ballots. It's like, well, generally speaking, individual voter fraud is not the issue. It's mostly systematic voter fraud or sort of vote manipulation, things like that are the real problem, or electronic voting machines where they don't have actual paper trail. But I think that what's interesting is he sort of cuts through all that, and Trump uses that issue to be like, no. Like, so I think it's important to remember that, either side of this could this really has become an all-out turf war. It just does feel like all the stops are pulled out. So yeah, I do feel that, anybody at this point can use a dirty trick to somehow steal this election in some way. And that could be one way that Biden's side could steal it, is by, doing some kind of voter fraud through mail-in ballots. I don't know, though. I mean, I would think even mail-in ballots, though, would actually technically be safer in terms of accountability for the votes than even an electronic voting machine would be, though.
I don't know, because you could just stuff them. Who's filling those ballots out? I mean, if people are, you know what I mean. And here's the thing: I don't like the electronics. The technology, again, Robbie, I'll say it, is available right now where we could have zero voter fraud, where you literally have a running live stream at all the ballots while people go in. They sit there, they do their paper ballot, they fill it out, they put it into the machine where it counts it. Then it is hand counted in front of everybody on a live stream with a feed right there for everybody to be able to check.
You remember that?
What's that?
They did that in Russia.
I mean, did they do that? Did they do that in Russia? Didn't they get caught though stuffing the ballots?
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So that's the interesting part, is they filmed every ballot location, and they found like tons of instances of individual voter fraud. So that would probably happen. I mean, we'd probably see that happen here too. Like,
yeah, but we would be able to call it out. It's amazing. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's my point. Is like you'd actually be able to be like, wait a minute. Oh, this is fucked up. We could stop this. But we don't want that. We've never wanted that. We want to take it into secret rooms or have secret numbers and have secret ballots. Listen, I'm all for your individuality. But again, having polling stations, see how many people went in, see how many people are going to tell you who they voted for afterwards. You get a good number. Then, once again, you see how many people actually went in. So, some of those votes are going to be disqualified. I get it. But if they fill it out, dicka-dicka-do, it's anonymous, it comes out. The film never stops running afterwards. Everybody takes the thing out. They stack it up on top one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. And you're there for what? 24 to 48 hours? And that solves the issue. But no, it'd be cheap. It would be accountability, and we'd be able to elect our leaders again. It's nutty, but it's not even being suggested. Robbie, where does everything go from here, brother? I mean, what are you looking at? What are the important issues other than this, the COVID 1984, the riots, the police brutality, the restructuring of society right now? What are we missing?
I don't know. I mean, what's interesting is I think I keep going back to QAnon. This idea that what if parts of QAnon, and I don't want people to get the wrong idea about what I'm saying, but what if parts of QAnon are real in the sense that Trump was actually hand appointed somehow by some insiders in the government launch some kind of counter coup against what they perceived as this deep state. To me, that means that all stops are out. Pull them all out for this election. If any of that's true, remotely true, then that means this is an all-out factionalized deep state turf war of some kind that we're witnessing. And this election is going to be some kind of reflection of that in some way, shape, or form. And it'll be interesting to see how, whether that means another Pizzagate style thing. We're going to see, we're going to see something else crazy, whether it's an October surprise, something is going to happen on top of the craziness that we're already witnessing. I mean, so I think that even though I do agree with you that this COVID-19 stuff is going to be used to do some, tricky things and slimy things with the election, I think we're not maybe seeing far enough into the future where there's going to be something new, dude, that's going to like make all this stuff just be like, remember that? Like, remember when we were worried about the pandemic and all the rioting? Like, holy shit, we were worried about that shit? Like,
I hope you're wrong. But at the same time, me and the QAnon stuff, I don't buy into it, but I do buy into the fact that Trump thought he was coming in there with a superhero cape. But if you ever, again, just look at the Netflix special. Doesn't mention the intelligence ties to Epstein once. Now, there's an investigation Discovery Channel special that it has 3 episodes now. I haven't watched 2 and 3. I'm going to. But it seems to be going in that direction. So in some aspects, the media that's getting less attention is asking real questions. That's never been resolved. And if you look at it, during the height of that Epstein scandal, it's Trump that was up there with Acosta as Acosta had to resign. No resolution as to the intelligence ties. It's Barr telling you Epstein did that he killed himself. Tried once, got it the second time. He killed himself. And then Alan Dershowitz, who's balls deep in the scandal, is all of a sudden defending Trump during Ukraine Gate and his impeachment. We were already far into fucking bizarro land, my friend. So this idea of, the deep state faction stuff, it's like, well, Trump told us he wanted to get out of Syria. We have an obvious false flag that's now been proven time and time again, not only from the footage, not only from the eyewitness accounts, but then the OPCW and the WikiLeaks leaks, right? That's all in our face. Didn't stop them from just drone bombing their entire crop a week ago. Didn't stop that, did it? So it's so hard for me, and the other thing is, yeah, there are internal fights, Robbie. Look at Peter Thiel. Apparently he's no longer the president's technology advisor, and he's upset with Trump. Trump is now finally going after big tech, supposedly. Trump leaves the WHO. There's a lot of things you got to give the guy credit for, and nobody wants to do that. But then you have to actually criticize him, not from the mainstream media, quote-unquote, left, that he's a Nazi and a bigot and sowing racial divide, but that he is actually killing brown people in mass with drone bombs in Yemen and policy decisions like the one in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq. That's the true racism, folks. And yet, you let him and his administration get away with trying to extradite a non-U.S. citizen for exposing those war crimes of many administrations, right? You won't even get out in the street for that. And that's still going on. I mean, that's the madness of today. Robbie Martin, he's got a very heavy agenda. YouTube and MediaRoots.org is to find his podcast with his sister. What's going on with you and Abby lately? What have you guys been covering?
Oh, well, my sister just had a child.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't know. Congratulations.
Yeah, so that makes me an uncle. So, but my head's still kind of spinning from that. I'm really excited about it, and I'm going to go visit her soon. So she's going to be on a little maternity leave from the podcast for a bit. So probably for the next 2 or 3 months, it'll just be me with guests.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's for the foreseeable future. That's what I'll be doing. And Maine Politics will be back this week, and we're going to have an announcement about that. And it's going to have an intro song and an intro and all that stuff. So it's going to be a sort of a new version of the show, new and improved.
Awesome, Robbie. Well, thanks for joining me, man. It's been too long, and I think I'm going to try before I go. When I leave the state and I try to go across the country, we'll see what happens. Well, fingers are crossed. I'm going to try to do another 24 and 24 videos in 24 hours, and we got to get you on for that. Agreed?
Yeah, I'd love to, man.
All right. Thanks, brother. I'll talk to you soon. There he is, Robbie Martin, one half of MediaRoots.org, but also does a lot of great stuff, also at a very heavy agenda. Remember, folks, I am fully demonetized on this channel. Make sure to thumbs the video up, subscribe, share if you're new. $5, $10, $15. The link is in the description. Big donors. Guys, I need you now more than ever to try to get across this crazy country of ours and show you where, I guess the freedom is, where the tyranny isn't, where the madness isn't. So much is changing so rapidly during this time period. And don't forget to check out my documentary films. They're free in the documentary playlist section. Shade the Motion Picture, so important right now. Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, so important right now. And then if you don't know what's really going down with 9/11, Loose Change Final Cut and Fabled Enemies, please go check them out. And again, make sure you're thumbsing up, subscribing, and sharing. And we just did another premium Rockfin only. Remember, you can just sign up and you'll get the free exclusive Goodbye WHO Trump video. You can go sign up now. Go check that video out. That's from yesterday. And then if you are a premium subscriber, endorsing myself and getting all the content from great creators like John Fitch, Ron Placone, Graham Elwood, Ben Askren, and others, you will also get the Deepfake Disasters Are Coming exclusive there as well. So guys, big things happening on Rockfin, but you're going to find that out in about a week or so. I love you, and I'll see you on the flip side.